Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the Confucius Analects. And right now we are toward to the end, the book 19. Last week we finished book 19, chapter 16. Today we will start from book 19, chapter 17. And the book 19 will have a little bit long to chapter 25, but each one is short. And then next week, we will go to book 20, the last book. And the book 20 only have a 3 chapters. So I'm very sure we will finish next week.
Jason,
Then,
I had us finishing at 15 and starting 16 tonight.
am I right? Anyone have? No, I'm sure we
No,
talked
no,
about.
it's
Yeah,
17, yeah.
we finished 16.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start. Book 19, chapter 17. I think right now we start to talk about another disciple, Zhang Zi. And then Zhang Zi is very important, no matter what's your opinion about Zhang Zi. Zhang Zi has been viewed as the orthodox successor of Confucius' teaching. And according to legend, mentions mentions study from Zhang Zi. Okay. So it's important. Okay, so let's start from chapter 17. And I believe Kwang, we have the honor for Kwang to read Dr. Eno's translation.
So,
Go ahead.
translation by Professor Robert Eno, 19.17. Master Zhang said, I have heard it from the master. A man may have exhausted himself in nothing else, but he must do so in mourning for his parents.
Thank you, Kwang. Okay, so let's read our translation, Amang and me. Yeah, here.
Book 19, chapter 17. Zhang Zi said, I have heard from teacher that one cannot express himself to the extreme except at his parents' funeral.
Thank you. Okay, Zheng Zi is famous for his so-called filial piety, xiao. Okay, so here he's talking about the most herself the most I should be mourning, the highest mourning is on the death of your parents, no higher than that. So that's the extreme. Okay, in a way, that's the worst situation one man can happen. Okay, so I think that's important. And the mentions continue on this one in his teaching. That's it. Ama, please.
Well, I've said before, everything in the Analects is reiteration. You've been told the lesson once, but then all the rest is just repetition of that lesson from different angles in different ways. Here we have Confucius' lesson on shao. What is appropriate shao? And Zhangzi is considered the most shao of his disciples. So it's good that he is the harbinger of this lesson in this final sort of review, because chapter 9 is entirely a review. It's all his disciples speaking about the lessons they learned from the master. And here he says, from teacher. Same thing, it's a little more familial at that point. But this idea of fully expressing oneself to the extreme, except is never acceptable, except at your parents' funeral. That should be the case, because true filial piety, true devotion to one's parents is something that carries beyond their death. In fact, the prescribed mourning period from Confucius has been 3 years. But here we see more than just that prescription for the ritual of mourning. We see Zhang Zhang saying that this is the full emotion, fully emote. You have clemency, you have license to sort of drop away all the shrouds of a jinsa, and I use that term less in the elevated person sense that Confucius means it, and more in the traditional sense of the scholar gentleman. You are free to drop those sort of airs aside to fully emote for your parents, and that is actually considered a better form of being a jinsa, not resting on ceremony or tradition or expectations, but letting your sort of wearing your heart on your sleeve in this one occasion.
Thank you, Amang. One of the example I like to mention is like, through the Chinese history, some people, if for example, like your wife, the one person's wife, okay, die, and then you crying, you being too sad and being criticized because you should not crying or mourning your wife or your loved one over, okay, your parents. Okay, I think that's very important. You take both sides. One way you take us, you should be very, very to the extreme sad in your parent as a one of teaching. Another way would be limit you, okay, your mourning over when you mourn your parent. So I don't remember the name. Somebody's the son died, and the father crying too much has been criticized. You should not mourn your son over. When you mourn your parents. Okay, so I think that's become one of the teaching. So I will hear how you react on this one. What do you think about this? Okay, this. Okay, so Mark and Nick. Mark, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Yeah, I have a question. Just a clarification about who we're talking about. Because my Chinese pronunciation isn't that great, and I think we're talking about the teacher of Han Fei, right? Shun Tzu.
No, 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 no. Sun Tzu is one of the Confucius disciple, a young disciple. He probably 45 younger than Confucius, and he lived for when he died, he probably already 100 years old. So that's the Zhang Tzu. And he is the teacher of Mencius. Nothing with Sun Tzu. That's totally
Oh,
different.
okay. How is this spelled in pinyin? How's his name spelled?
Uh, Zeng, okay. Zheng.
Zeng, Zheng.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
Okay,
cool.
so
And then
yeah,
I,
yeah.
then I was also thinking maybe you were talking about Sun Tzu, the author
No,
of The
no,
Art
no,
of
no, no,
War. So,
no,
okay,
no.
Zheng Tzu, Zeng.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's important. Don't make mistake. Thank you for clear to ask this question. Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. I want to add a footnote to what Arman was saying. First, I agree with what Arman said. And second, I would argue that this text is wider than just to the big guys, the Junzi. Because the text actually uses the word "ren," people, person. So it's expected of everybody. Give in to your emotion when you mourn the death of your parents, basically. And that has nothing to do whether you are cultivated, you are scholar, or you are accomplished, or whatever. As long as you are a person, that's what you do. Yeah.
Thank you, Nick. I think that's very important. And so I think you point out I would say something I haven't translated because usually I will translate this word when I do it, but I didn't translate people here. And since he used people, so it could means everybody, and it could be means human nature doing this way. Thank you for pointing out. Kwang, please.
Yes, Jason mentioned very rightly that Zheng is one of Confucius's disciples, which embody the orthodox tradition. Let's not forget that on the four books, one is by Confucius, the other is by Mencius, the third is by Confucius' grandson, and the fourth is by Zhenzi, the tertiary. We also said the last time that Zhu Xia, the guy who gave the major interpretation of the Chongqiu, was also an embodiment of the Orthodox tradition. You would notice that on 25 paragraphs, Zhu Xia has 11 paragraphs and Zhengzi has 4 paragraphs. I am not pointing that just for the pleasure of pointing that, even if it has something to do with that too, but just to say that Zhengzi is important, but let's not forget that it has been edited by the Imperial Bureau in 124 BCE. So the stuff that was addressed by Zhu Xia, the other one, the one who has 11 paragraphs devoted to him, was more on universal history, or if you want, on the building of empire. And Zhengzi is more on the personal behavior. It doesn't mean that personal behavior is not important, but I would say that it's maybe more important than empire building. But I want to stress that because those books have been collected as the teaching for the imperial bureaucracy. Okay. And the second point, I will be very brief. There's a lot of stuff in the Confucianist teaching concerning the family. Let's not forget that there's one family in China that shaped the Chinese mentality and the Chinese culture. That family is the Qi royal house, also known as the Zhou dynasty. And everything that is addressed in the Confucianist books revolve around the tradition, the habits, the culture of that family, who somehow extended their habits to all the families of the Chinese people. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. So probably we can move on for chapter 18, which also is teaching by Zheng.
I just wanted to add one more last thought, and then we move on. And that is that what makes parents so unique for expressing this level of emotion is that in a person, and this is sort of the Job interpretation, if you will, but in a person's life, they are the only non-replaceable figures. You can have a new wife, you can have new children, you can make new friends, but your parents are infinitum your parents. You will never be able to replace that. I think that's a component of it as well.
Yeah, and you have 100% no choice. Okay? You can do some technique to a different kind of children, okay? But you can. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Chapter 18, Kwang, please.
Okay, 19.18 by Professor Robert Eno. Master Zhang said, I have heard it from the master. With regard to the filiality of Meng Chuangzi, in all other respects, he did only what others may do, but in retaining his father's ministers and his father's policies, he accomplished something difficult.
Chapter 18, Among, please.
Book 19, Chapter 18. Zhang said, "This is what I have heard from teacher. Others may strive to be able to match the xiao of Meng Zhuangzi. He didn't alter his late father's ministers nor his late father's policies. This is difficult to match."
Thank you, Amang. Okay, so well, one small thing. I start to use. I think you see other translation as Professor Enos translate as a master, because I usually translate when they mention about Confucius. When the disciple mention or other people mention about Confucius, sometimes they say 子, I will translate as a master. Sometimes they translate a 夫子. Okay, I will translate as teacher. Okay, so that's the way I put the capital teacher here. Okay, because in the original Chinese text, the Chinese text, instead of call 子, they call teacher. Okay, 夫子. Okay, that's why I translate the teacher. So here is also another important teaching. Here is previous one talking about how you have to, when you mourn for the death of your parents, it should be to the most, okay, sad situation. Here, you're talking about after, well, here basically mentioned about your father. What you do after your father's death. The most difficult part and the most important part is don't change your father's policy. But here we assume, okay, they talking about the noble people, aristocrat. Okay, so basics, they all have a certain job, inherit your parents, your father's job. And when you take over your father's job, you don't change your father's minister or don't change your father's policy. Okay, so that's very important. And then the person here mentioned is Meng Zhuangzi. Okay, so whenever you see Meng, okay, that's the powerful family in the state of Lu, and Meng is probably the second most powerful family. The most powerful is the Ji family. So whenever Confucius mentioned about Ji family, usually is some criticism. Okay, but the Meng family, okay, because the Confucius prefer the Meng family, so usually have a good word about Meng family. Yeah, thank you. Amount, please.
Thank you. This chapter actually makes me think of what Quan had just said about sort of the normative power of the Ji family, setting down expectations that filter in through society. And China was no different than many other societies where what we would call high culture eventually makes its way into common culture. And so, although this idea of not changing ministers or policies really only speaks to the gentry or the scholarly class, this becomes so much of the conservative leaning, and I'm saying conservative with a small c, of Chinese culture, so much so that if your father made wine, you will make wine this way. If your father, was a roof shingler and you inherit your family trade, but you're expected, there is almost an expectation that becomes, you don't change it. You keep it the same as it has always been because it has always worked. In fact, that's almost a joke in Chinese medicine that Western medicine will advertise to you the newest, greatest medicine or drug on the market. Chinese medicine will offer you the same thing that your great, 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 great grandfather took, because if it was good enough for them, it's good enough for you. this really does filter to society-wide in Asia. The whole of Confucian-influenced Asia gets this sort of extreme conservatism that stems from this sentiment that was, already prevalent at Confucius' time.
Thank you, Mom. Okay, so let's see any comment, any reaction on this one, please. Kwang, please.
I would like to bring a famous example illustrating the principle of 19.18. In a few words, what says 19.18 is that you have to keep on the endeavor of your forefathers till the achievement of that endeavor. Okay, that's another way to express it. Well, I talk about the Ji royal house. There is another royal house, the Ying royal house, Ying, the royal house of the kingdom of Qin, who created the first Chinese empire. Between 361 BCE and 221 BCE, 140 years passed, and Duke Xiao of Qin decided in 361 BCE to improve his state in order to create the empire. And his offspring kept on his promise during 140 years till the achievement of the endeavor defined by their ancestors. So that's a famous one that I cannot stop to share right now. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. Mark, please.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I'm wondering if Jason or Eamon not Eamon, Juan, want to comment on Eamon's comment about the extreme conservatism. I've heard that as well in different sources, and I've even heard it speculated that the Cultural Revolution was kind of a overreaction to that conservatism, as blaming the century of humiliation on that conservatism. And I don't have enough of a sense of Chinese culture to really understand that, but I'm wondering if anybody else wants to comment on how that conservatism maybe compares to what we think of as conservatism, like in the United States. That's it. Thank you.
Remember what Amang talked about is a small c conservative. Amang, you want to make it clear on the.
Yeah, I will say that Outside Mark is inviting the opening of a gigantic can of worms. But especially when you talk about, the Chinese Republic and then later the Civil War, there was inarguably a backlash to the standard order of things under the Qing dynasty. But even the Qing were sort of seen as undesirable. There was huge movements to oust the Qing, restore the Ming. For centuries, that conservative leaning still abided for a very, very long time. And there are these dual tensions. That's about as much as I'm going to say about that, because otherwise this goes into way in the weeds.
Yeah, we should not spend too much time to discuss, like, who did this, who did what. I think that's very difficult. But I like what Amang gave the example about the medicine, right? In the Western culture or in the Western medicine, you always see that's the new technology. Let's do that. And I don't see any single Chinese herb or Chinese medicine advertising talking about that's the new invention. They always say that's 4,000 years. Okay. So I think that's the reflect how people think, in this. Of course, you can find the exception. Oh, no, somebody do this. Yeah, but in general, people believe so. We'll hear from Kwang and Nick.
Okay, so I'm not going to give a practical example, but rather a general distinction. I would suggest to make the difference between conservatism with a capital C and conservatism with a small c. Let's start with conservatism with a capital C. that conservatism is equivalent to tradition for me. And one way that I define tradition is that tradition is not the worship of dead ashes, but the transmission of the living flame. What do I mean by that? The transmission of the living flame is precisely the transmission of the infinite awareness, okay, of the meditational capacity, or another way to say it is the transmission of the fact that we human beings we live at the same time on the horizontal dimension of time and on the vertical reality of infinite awareness. That is the conservatism with a capital C. The other conservatism, which is real in Chinese culture, in the sense that if 19.18 is interpreted as you stay faithful to the endeavor of your forefathers till its achievement, for example, the sixth or seventh generation from 361 BCE to 221 BCE of the Ying royal house working to achieve the first Chinese empire, that conservatism, meaning to keep on the endeavor of your forefathers without failing, that's a good thing. But sadly, there is also a dimension of the small conservatism, which consists to respect a lot the old stuff. Uh, from the, I would say that in Chinese civilization, there were always, let's say, outliers, even within the aristocracy and the gentry, that would make the difference. And the typical illustration of that is precisely chapter 19, because you have the embodiment of the orthodox line that would be given a prominent place, meaning Zhixia with 11 paragraphs devoted to him, and Zhengzi, I think, 4. But
Huang, did
the minor places would bring a difference. Is there
you
something, Sir Jason?
you probably lost your voice? Lost your
Just
sound
at
for
about the last 10 seconds of what you were
yeah.
saying, I think dropped
Okay.
off.
Do you hear me right now? Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah, now, yeah.
okay. So I'm coming back to the fact that chapter 19 an excellent illustration of that, in the sense that there are always outliers even between within the aristocracy, and chapter 19 of the Analects is the perfect illustration of that, because Zhu Xia and Zheng Zi, who were the embodiments of the orthodox lines, were given the prominent positions, but the other voices in the minority are not silenced. Zhu Zhang, Zhu You are given a place, even if their place are obviously smaller. I stop here.
All right, thank you, Huang. Let's go to Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. Mark's question is intriguing, and it really speaks to the context we're reading this work, in the sense that, and I'm repeating some quite mainstream consensus on the evolution of Chinese civilization and Chinese thought, in the sense that somehow the Chinese got something working, 2,000 years ago. And it sort of worked so well for more than 1,000, even 2,000 years. It lost the vitality. It lost the urge to innovate. So therefore, it had trouble getting into the modernity. And by the 18th century, 19th century, clearly was lagging behind. So in a sense, maybe last 100 years, plus or minus a few decades, has been a desire to rebel against that history across broad aspects, anything you can think of, even linguistics, culture, morality, thinking, etc., which continues till today. I think that's a very good way to sort of situate us in the contemporary context while we read this ancient text. Yeah, thanks.
All right, thank you, Nick. Okay, so let's move on to 19th. Kwang, please.
Okay, so 19.19, Professor Robert Eno's translation. The Meng family appointed Yang Fu as warden. Yang Fu inquired of Master Zhang. Master Zhang said, those who rule have departed from the town, and the people have long been left to their own devices. If you get to the true facts of a case, then react with commiseration and pity and never take pleasure in it.
Thank you, Kwang. Let's read the translation. 19.
Book 19, Chapter 19. The Meng family appointed Yang Fu as a warden. He asked Zhang Zi for advice. Zhang Zi said, those at the top position have lost their Tao, and the people have been undisciplined for a long time. When you gather their cases, be pitiful on the people, but not unhappy, but not happy.
Thank you, Amam. Okay, so here is Meng family again. Okay, so Yang Fu, I believe he is the disciple of Zheng Zi, and then he, of course, he is his teacher. Well, the job of Wei Si Si, okay, in general we translate as warden, and then warden during that time, I think that he probably doing the job to make sure the safety, the secure, the stability of the local city, local government, kind of the head of the local area. So the job is kind of as a warden in today's sense, also as a policeman, chief police, also as a judge. Okay, so I think the Zheng Zi's advice is very, in a way, is very good, right? So when people have been undisciplined, so your job is to discipline the people. When you gather the case, be pitiful but not happy. Okay, so I think that we don't know. He talked about should not be happy on what, because I will say don't be proud, don't be too proud of your achievement, because your achievement is to, not put this way, discipline the people. So don't be happy about what your achievement, which is discipline the people. So you have to have some compassion or be pitiful to the people. I think that's an important message. So instead of being proud or happy about what you have achieved, you should put more effort to feel pitiful to the people. Okay, that's what I like to say. Okay, Aman, please.
Yeah, a little bit about this position that we've translated as warden. It could also be said judge. In fact, probably the most famous depiction in at least modern terms of this kind of position is Judge D. Some of you may have heard of the celebrated cases of Judge D, which is the book that was written only a couple hundred years ago, that is supposedly taken from older texts, but it's all about this figure, and I'm holding a copy right now because I was thinking about it. If you can see the cover, so celebrated cases of Judge D, but if you can see this cover, you can see D in that hat behind his desk, and you see the figure on the ground with the thumb screws on her hands, extracting confession, because confession was considered to be the premier form of evidence. this is what Yang Fu has been tasked to do. And he's going to be hearing cases from people who have been running wild. And he's going to his former teacher, his master, Zhang, for advice as to like, how do I dole out the proper amount of torture as opposed to the improper amount of torture? And what he's telling him here is that you're in a top position of a people who have lost their way. They've lost the way for a very long time. So when you're judging them, be pitying upon them, and don't take any sort of pleasure in what your position affords you to do. This is kind of interesting because this steers away from Shao as the lesson, obviously, but let's think about it in terms of Shao as a subtext to this. These people have lost their way for a long time, for a very long time. Their forefathers have erred. They have kept commensurate with the behavior of their forefathers. And now you're in a position where you're trying to restore Tao and you're trying to upset that apple cart. So you're violating, oddly, a degree of, let's think of it as wrong Shao or lesser Shao, a devotion to a wrong way of being. So have pity upon these people because it's going to take time to actually correct this. And don't see yourself as some avenging angel coming in there to make right. You are, doing the awful necessary work required to restore the Tao in this kingdom. It's very interesting that this advice, but again, that sort of pecking order. The advice of Shao at this time mostly reflects what the gentry should do. The peasants, they're getting a taste of it, but they obviously can carry it out wrongly. And here they've done that in spades. So it's up to you to try and restore a correct Tao.
Thank you, Amam. Okay, that's any comment on this one? No? Kwang, please.
Okay, so what Amansai just said is very interesting because in China, you have even in the West, the life of the nobility and the life of the people are two different kinds of life, of course. And in China, it has been stated in the following way by the Confucianists that the gentleman, and here you have to understand gentleman in the sense of hereditary nobility and not of epistemologically advanced people. So the gentlemen have li, meaning rituals, and the common people have customs or habits. So here, that advice from Master Zhang to Yang Fu reflect that, okay, in the sense that yes, because you are from the gentleman class, you have rituals. But when you deal with people having only habits and customs, well, you have to be nicer with them because um, there's a undertone of looking down on people, but looking down on people with a sense of commiseration. Okay, what he means, after all, they are animals, so be nice with your animals. Okay, it reminds me of the advice that the Romans philosopher Seneca gave to his friends, okay, about the slaves. Okay, he said, "Well, be nice to the slaves because, after all, they are animals, but it's not because they are animals that you have to mistreat them." So it's the same kind of looking down on people, but with a yes, Ammon wrote the compassionate elitism. I think it's perfect. Okay, I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. Yeah, I think this one, Kwang's comment, yeah, I think that's one important thing is shows Confucianism's progressive. Okay, we constantly say they are conservative, but here is a progressive side because traditionally, for the nobleman is governed by ritual. For the common people are governed by punishment, right? 行不下世人，理不下，行不上世人，理不上。I don't know what to say. I just got confused. Basically, you use ritual to control the noble people, and you use the punishment to control the common people. So right now, Yang Fu's job is doing the impose the punishment to the common people. And then Zhang, as a Confucius disciple, tell him, okay, be pitiful, okay, because eventually Confucius' purpose is to lift these common people to the level of noblemen and want them to learn these. So eventually, ritual is the purpose, not punishment. I think that's another important message here. Mark S. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jason. My question is about how book 19 reflects on the relationship between teacher and student. Because we've been told a lot about how to mourn parents, how to carry on the tradition of your father, how to follow the great families. Are we being told something explicit or implicit about how to honor your teachers?
Thank you, Mark.
That is Confucius.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mark. When I recall, I don't see any, that's limited to the Confucius Analect. Okay, probably Kwang or Aman can help me. Does Confucius teaching about how to treat your teacher? Probably not, right? I don't know. You guys have answer?
I mean, there's a little like it's more of subtext than explicit text. He's much
Yeah,
more
you can
clear
say
about
subtext. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can say you treat your teacher as your parent. As you have to respect your parent, and you have to respect your teacher, and you have to respect the worthy man, and your teacher is worthy man. Yeah, indirect, you can say that, but seems like there's no direct, okay, a rule or ritual or whatever you need to treat
the
your
one
parent.
exception to that would be you deliver a gift of meat that
Yeah.
chapter on. So there are rules about this.
Book 1, yeah, but which is not Anyway, let's hear what Kwang want to say. Thank you, Mark. Again, that's a great question.
I think there is a subtext throughout the whole Analects. Okay, if I limit myself to the Analects.
Yeah, please.
Because you know that in traditional China, it's very rare for a father to teach his son directly. Okay, he will always ask for another main member of the family or one of his friends that he respects to be the teacher of his son. Why? Because there is a very clear understanding that your parents give you your body, but your soul is born with the teacher. So, in a certain way, there is a subtext within Confucianism that the teacher is almost superior to the father because the teacher is giving birth to the soul and the father is gave only birth to your body.
Okay, so still okay, indirect. Let's put it this way. Okay, I think that's a good question, and then or anybody find the direct text, and I would like to know. Say.
And sorry to interrupt, I just take 10 seconds. And I would say that it's the same requirement concerning how to transmit the legacy of the father. And concerning the teacher, it's also your endeavor to transmit his intellectual legacy. I stop here.
Okay, thank you, Kwang. Okay, so we finished Zheng Zi. So next 6 is about Zhigong. So forget about Zheng Zi. So let's talk about another disciple, Zhigong. Zhigong is good in, I just like to focus. Zhigong is good in language. Okay, and personally, I like Zhigong much more than Zheng Zi. That's me. Okay, he's quite smart, and then he seems being successful politically. Okay, you remember Confucius take the job in the state of Lu, but I believe he got fired. Okay, so after 3 or 4 years, and Zheng Zi has been taking the position after Confucius died, and he seems doing very well. And it's important to see how Zheng Zi, okay, in a way, try to keep distance from Confucius. And also want to respect Confucius. Okay, I'm talking about not a moral way or whatever. I just try to describe the situation, and that's how I read for the last 6 chapters. So let's start from chapter 20, and Kwang, please, if you can read.
Okay, 19.20, Professor Eno's translation. Zhigong said the wickedness of Zhou could not have been as extreme as they say. That is why the Junzi hates to dwell downstream. All the world's evils are relegated there.
Thank you, Kwang. Okay, so Aman, please.
Book 19, Chapter 20. Zhigong said, the tyrant Zhou may not be bad to the extreme. This is why Junzi hates to dwell in a lowliness. I should just read, in lowliness.
In lowliness.
Where
Okay.
all the evils of the world accumulate.
Thank you, Aman. Okay, so I have to add the tyrant Zhou because that's the difficult part in Chinese translation. That's why Mark got confused about the Zheng Zi and the Sun Zi because the word. Okay, so Zhou. Okay, instead of Zhou. Okay, so I add the tyrant. So not the Zhou dynasty, which is good, or Duke Zhou, which is sage. Okay, who is a sage? Duke Zhou. Here talk about Zhou. Okay, the tone is different. That means a famous tyrant. Okay, so here use the example Zhou. Okay, so that's why I always add the tyrant Zhou. Zhou as the example. So Zhigong said, actually, the tyrant Zhou is not that bad. Okay, because he has a bad name, so people start to add more thing on that. So he's actually is not that bad. So he used this one as not as we to be more fairly criticize people or more unbiased. He asks us to avoid being labeled as a bad name because people as soon as you has a bad reputation, people start to give you more crime or give you more sin to you. So his example is 下流 in lowliness, right? Just like water, if you stay in the low situation, then the water still flowing and you will still start to accumulate all the bad thing. Okay, so I think that's Zhigong's teaching here. And a little bit about the translation. Usually I translate sun, okay, as good. Okay, and then he talk about 君子之不善 okay, 纣之不善 is I translate it as bad. Okay, so he may not be to be bad as to the extreme. Okay, so that's the reason I translate this way. Okay, thank you. And Mom.
Yeah, a reminder about Zhigong. Zhigong is the student of Confucius who started off poor and made money, and he was very interested in making money. But he was also not. He wound up not being an egotist about his success. He learned to accept it with some degree of humility. And here we have his first lesson talking about listening to gossip, basically, and why that is the lowliest of places. It's where all the evils of the world accumulate, is taking small talk or light gossip or rumors as gospel. And so this figure, Zhou, who he's talking about, the tyrant Zhou, has earned this reputation as the tyrant Zhou. And he's making a nuanced evaluation. Maybe he wasn't as bad as people say. But what he also gives advice on is not just what a junsa is faithful to and loves, which is what Zhang has been talking about with Shao and with, but what it is okay to be find loathsome, to be repugnant, to be absolutely anathema to the way of being of a real junsa. And that is, tearing others down for just the salaciousness or the titillation of that kind of rumor mongering. Jason, you're muted.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mom. Okay, so let's hear any question, comment, any reaction on this one? Kwang, please.
Zhang is from the merchant class, and I would think that, and he came to Confucius when he was already a young man of 25. Okay, compared to Zheng Zi, who knew Confucius when he was a teenager of maybe 12 or 13 years old. Same for Zhi Xia. So Confucius influenced a lot Zhang, but at the same time, you can see that Zhang kept a certain independence of judgment compared to the other younger disciples of Confucius, or the disciples coming from the gentry or the aristocracy. Um, at the time of Confucius, meaning around 500 BCE, there was a merchant class not born into the low gentry or the high aristocracy, which was quite wealthy and not having political influence, but not having political influence. So I'm sure that Zhang, when he went studying with Confucius, was motivated by noble reasons, that for sure. But I also think that he was motivated by the fact that receiving the teaching of a member of the gentry would add a kind of prestige to his wealth that he would not have otherwise. But at the same time, he kept the common sense of a merchant, in a sense, because the wickedness of the tyrant Zhou is a trope, okay, a motif within the Chinese aristocracy, explaining the fall of a dynasty because the ruler lost his virtues. Explanation that I agree with, but sometimes it can become quite a caricature, always to repeat that kind of explanation rather than to analyze, for example, the changes in the climate, the change in the economic structure, or stuff like that, that in modern time we would call the objective factors. Even if, as a promoter of Confucianism, I believe in the explanation concerning the decrease of virtues, of course. Anyway, here we see Zhang saying the wickedness of Zhou, of the tyrant Zhou, could not have been as extreme as they say. Okay, he means, okay, probably the guy was not an example of high virtue, but there was some exaggeration in the storytelling, most probably, and there were objective factors like economic changes or climate changes that we did not take into account. I stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Kwang. I think that you phrased very well. He's still, since he coming from the merchant background, the merchant family, so he is more practical, and he keeps a lot of common sense on that. Okay, thank you. Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. Just want to follow up on this thought. Because he is regarded as sort of the, not the god, but the sort of the what's the word? You know, in the Greek legend, or maybe the Roman legend, there is a god for every trade, and a god for merchant. I think it's called Mercury or something like that. So Zhigong occupied that kind of position in the Chinese culture. And so viewing him in that regard, what this passage says to me is the importance of reputation, credibility, right? So the guy wasn't talking about what happened in a particular situation, but you know, to protect your own reputation, to make sure you don't contaminate your own credibility. And that's very important in commercial transactions. So I see connection there in this passage.
Thank you, Nick. So let's move on 21, chapter 21. Another very, I think, is very practical advice from Zhigong.
Okay, 19.21 by Professor Eno. Zhigong said, the errors of a Junzi are like eclipses of the sun and moon. Everyone sees them. Once he corrects them, everyone looks up to him.
Thank you, Kwang. Okay, that's 21.
There we go. Book 19, chapter 21. Zhigong said, an error made by a junzi is like the eclipse of the sun or moon. When he errs, all people see him. Once he corrects, all people look up to him.
Thank you, Amam. I think that's another good advice, right? So as a Junzi, I think the Confucius kind of Confucian teaching is more like everybody see you. Okay, that's nothing like you by yourself. And then the second message is, well, first message, what you do, everybody will see. Okay, so that's important to not do wrong. Second thing, correct your mistake is also very important, and sometimes more important than avoiding, because you can the people, nobody can guarantee no mistake, but but important thing is everybody can correct his own or her own mistake. Amam, please.
Yeah, I'm struck by what Nick had just said about sort of Zhigong's merchant values informing, or at least giving a lean to his understanding of Confucius teachings. Here in both his first and second, it's about how you are perceived by others. And as a merchant, that would be of paramount concern. And here it extends into the political with a refrain that feels very much like, it's not the crime, it's the cover-up. It's not just if you make a mistake. That's bad. But if you try to not correct it and cover it up, that's going to be even worse than if you just own up to it and people can admire you for saying, I'm not perfect, I made a mistake. I'm, my favorite quote out of the Count of Monte Cristo, I'm a priest, not a saint. You have to acknowledge your shortcomings. And you need to be cognizant that in a position of stature and power, you're going to attract the notice of people who you may see as beneath you, but I think there is an undercurrent of ren here, the idea that you are beholden to these people, whether you realize it or not, because you have this stature and this position and this rank and this privilege because of these people. If they decide to pick up the pitchforks and torches, it ends badly for you. So don't screw up and then cover up your screw up and then have to cover that up and just leave a trail of, awful in your track. Try OFAL. Do try and make correction and be the Junsa that you are trying to be. Jason had to step away, so I will ask for any comments, anyone who has thoughts on this chapter. I'll give you just a minute to make up your minds, and if we don't have any, bear with me a second, one of my ears went dead. All right. Seems pretty cut and dry to everybody. So let's move on to chapter 22 then. Quan, you want to go ahead and read Inu's?
Yes, absolutely. So 1920 to 22 by Professor Ino. Kong Sun Chao of Wei asked Zhang, where did Zhongni acquire his learning? Zhang said the town of Kings Wen and Wu had not yet crumbled. It lay within people. The worthy recall its brighter aspects, the unworthy recall its lesser aspects. In nothing was there not something of the town of Kings Wen and Wu. Where would the master not have acquired learning? And yet, what single teacher could there have been for him?
Thank you, Kwam. Okay, so this one is another subject. Okay, since Confucius is so great, and who is Confucius' teacher? Okay, so, Aman, can you read?
Absolutely. Book 19, chapter 22. Gong Sun Chao asked Wei asked Zhang, from whom did Zhong Ni, Confucius, learn? Zhang said, the Tao of kings Wen and Wu has not yet fallen to the ground. It exists within people. The worthy men recollect the greater parts. The not so worthy men recollect the lesser parts. There's no place where the Tao of kings Wen and Wu doesn't exist. From whom did teacher not learn? How could he learn from an ordinary teacher?
Thank you, Aman. So here is the very great question. Oh, first thing I'd like to mention, here start to mention Confucius, Zhongni. Okay, so I don't know how does the Zhongni, right? So it's a little bit unusual here mentioned about I think it's for the Zhigong section, this sixth section. Even Zhigong mentioned about Confucius, talk about use the word 仲尼. 仲尼 is Confucius' courtesy name. So usually is being called by your peer. So the disciple usually don't call Confucius 仲尼. Confucius don't call himself 仲尼. He will say himself as Chu. That's his given name. So your subordinate or the disciple or your children, grandchildren will not call your given name, even not courtesy name. Okay, you always call us a teacher, just like before. Zhengzi always say teacher. Okay, not it never say 仲, but here start to say 仲. It's an interesting question. Okay, in my opinion, it could be, well, one thing is it could be his merchant background. Okay, possibly, and another thing is Confucius already died for a long time. So kind of refer him as a third person. Another reason is Zhigong also in a very high position, being very respectful. So, but anyway, that's probably a small issue. But uh, here they ask from whom did the Zhongni Confucius learn? And Zhigong's answer is interesting. He talked about since Confucius, in general, we can consider Confucius as a first teacher. Okay, not only in China, probably in the world, the first teacher, the concept of teacher. Okay, so and since you are the first teacher, who is your teacher? Where do you learn it from? Right? He said that the ancient time, Wen Wu, that means King Wen and the King Wu, the founding father and the son of the Zhou dynasty, already have the Tao, and then the worthy people pick the big one, the major one, and even the not so worthy person, 不贤, I will translate as not so worthy, okay, man collect the lesser part, right? There's no, so that means the Tao is everywhere. You can learn things everywhere. And the Confucius, as a great teacher, okay, he learned from so here he learned from the Tao of Qin Wen and Wu. Okay, so that's Zhigong's answer. Okay, thank you. Amang, please.
Yeah, this is a very interesting chapter. Looking at it again, it's been a little while since we were here. It is curious that Gong Su Chao would refer to Confucius in a familial way like this. Not certain why there's an inclination there, but it would be as strange as my grandson calling me Amon. It would feel weird to not hear granddad out of those lips. And this sort of formality amongst noblemen was everything. We've talked about this in previous chapters, that there is a etiquette game that exists that all of the nobles play. And so something that just rings off always will draw attention. And this is one of those things that rings off. But the rest of this about where did he learn? It sounds like he may have a very long way of explaining, oh, master was an autodidact. He was able to pick up learning from everywhere around him. But there's something very Confucian about rooting it in Kings Wen and Wu. This is tradition, and this tradition has been here. People have held on to pieces, some bad, some not so good. What Master was not, in his own words, an innovator, but a transmitter. He was the filter of all of this Tao into the modern time. And that, I think, is some of what the lesson, the penultimate lesson of Confucius is, that to be a good teacher is to be a good student, and to be a good student is to be a good filter of all the wisdom, all the knowledge you receive. I may be projecting a little, but that's my editorializing this chapter.
Thank you, Amang. Mark, please. Outside Mark, I believe.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Yeah, so I think I got Amon's answer to my question, although he might want to elaborate. I'm not sure. But so this seems a little strange to me to say that he learned from the founder of the Zhao dynasty, because my general impression of Confucianism is it's very practical and kind of devoid of mysticism or religious sentiments. And to me, that sounds a little mystical, like you learn from a spirit or a ghost. And the way I interpreted what Eamon said is he just kind of observed the traditions of the Zhao dynasty around him. And then that saying he learned from the founder of the Zhao dynasty is kind of a metaphorical way of saying that he observed the cultural norms around him. So I'm wondering how people who are familiar with the text in Chinese culture interpret that. Like, to what degree is there like a mystical aspect to this? To what degree is that metaphorical? Or to what degree it should be interpreted literally? That's it.
Yeah, before we go to Kwang, let me have my answer first. Okay, so Kwang could have a different. Hey, that's common. So my answer is, to me, it's still very practical. There's no metaphysical, there's no mystical, because you just like, you learn from everyday life. So the text here, that's, I would say that's my style. Okay. 常识, okay, this word 常识 I've translated as ordinary teacher, right? So usually I read this text very practical, very down to the earth, okay, because Confucius can pick up everything. When you walk to the ancestral temple, you see how people practice, you see all the ancient setup, and Confucius pick up the knowledge or ritual or moral lesson from there. So in my opinion, there's nothing mystical, nothing metaphysical, okay, on that. So that's my point. Okay.
I'm going to take one quick crack before Quan, just to say I think Confucius is agnostic on this subject. When asked, he says, when asked about the afterlife, the infamous statement, "You don't yet know how to serve the living. How can you know how to serve spirits and the dead?" So it's not that it's not there, or that it's not necessarily in the background, but it's kind of agnostic in the Analects. Later Confucianism certainly takes a position on this.
Thank you. Kwang, please.
Okay, so once again, I will use the hexagram to give my answer. Okay. Confucianism is a teaching of the pragmatic and practical aspects of life, like the lower trigram. But there is a higher teaching concerning infinite awareness, and that is the upper trigram. So the word Tao, which simply means the way, can be interpreted as the combination or the integration of the practical dimension and of the infinite awareness dimension. I would like to quote once again one of the four books, the Zhong. Okay, the first line of the Zhong is what has been ordained by heaven is called your nature to be in harmonic resonance with your nature is called the Tao, and to cultivate the Tao is called the teaching. Professor Eno translates the second line not to be in harmonic resonance of your with your nature is called the Tao, but he would translate as to lead by your Tao is called to lead by your nature. I'm sorry, to lead by your nature is called the Tao. So that dimension is more about the upper trigram, the reality of infinite awareness. I want to mention that the Zhongyong has been attributed to Confucius' grandson, Zhi. However, Zhi did not write the Zhongyong. Zhi edited the Zhongyong because the Zhongyong is chapter 31 of the Li Ji. And the Li Ji is a book on rituals that has been created under the Zhou dynasty before Confucius' birth. Okay, so it was not his grandson who wrote it, but his grandson made an edition of the Zhongyong. So, and I finished with a small detail. Gong Sun Chiao of Wei was an aristocrat, so there's nothing special that he would refer to Confucius by his courtesy name, Zhongni, because if he when he was interacting with Confucius, he would call Confucius Zhongni, so it's absolutely normal. I stop here.
Thank you, Kwang. Nick, please.
Yeah, thanks. The outside mark, the question is interesting. So I want to share a thought. So I would agree, you know, clearly Confucius was not into the methodical stuff. So Wu and Wen were the two historical figures. There are records and stuff they dig out of the ground to prove that these two guys existed and all that stuff. So they were actually, ancient figures in history. So Confucius was drawing lessons from there and establishing his moral codes to the society, etc., etc. So very down to earth, kind of. It reminds me almost like Socrates. You know, want to focus on what's going on inside, this world. How to morally behave rather than metaphysically or spiritually or religiously searching for transcendent truth. So that was so obviously his pupils, his disciples, etc., developed the school of thought and became dominant and successful, all that stuff. And then, but then for a complete moral system that governs, millions, even hundreds of millions of people, you would need something that is metaphysically robust, right? So the earlier Confucianism lacked that. You got a collection of aphorisms, good stuff, but it was a very disorganized collection of sayings, Analects. Therefore, in the early 5th, 7th century, when the Buddhism came, the Confucianism was really challenged because the Buddhism has a much more consistent underlying metaphysical system. And therefore, by the 12th, 13th century, the new Confucianists had to patch up, had to, provide a new metaphysical foundation to the ancient teachings of Confucius. That's why they kind of re-edited all those, classics cited by Kwang and Jason, which were reputed to be edited by these guys, Zhang or whatever. So that was an effort much later after Confucius in the 12th, 13th century, try to provide a metaphysical foundation to the moral system. Yeah, so that's how I see it. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Nick. Okay. Yeah, let's move on for 23, chapter 23.
Okay, so 19.23, translation by Professor Robert Eno. Shu Sun Wu Shu said to the grandees at court, Zikong is worthier than Zhongni. Zifu Jingba reported this to Zikong. Zikong said, if one used walls surrounding a residence to make a comparison, my residence would have walls of shoulder height, so a passerby could peer over and see how fine the buildings and chambers were. The master's walls would tower many yards higher. Without entering through the gate, one could not see the beauty of the ancestral hall and the richness of the many buildings. Few seem to have found their way through the gate. So it is to be expected that people would say such things about the master.
Thank you, Kwang. Okay, so this one is Yeah, this one.
Book 19, Chapter 23. Shushan Wu Shu, addressing the major officers of the court, said, Sigong is worthier than Zhang Ni, Confucius. Zhu Fu, Jingbo, reported it to Zigong. Zigong said, let's use a house and its outer walls as an analog. My Zi walls are shoulder high. One can peer over the beauty of the house and the rooms. Teacher's walls were many yards high. One cannot see the beauty of the ancestral temple and the richness of the office unless he enters through the gate. Those who
Thank
can
you.
enter through
Go ahead.
the gate are few. Isn't it expected that Master Shushan Wu Shu would say so?
Thank you, Mom. Okay, so this one is a famous one, and you can see how Zigong used his language to defend Confucius, right? First one is, a previous one is people asking, who is the teacher of the first teacher? Right now, it's people start to talk about Zigong is better than his teacher. Well, I believe he's happy, but he doesn't want to say you are wrong. Okay, he doesn't want to say uh, I'm less. Okay, my teacher is much better than me, but he used this metaphor. Okay, and that shows his language skill, right? He talk about, yeah, I'm good, right? But you can see me, my just use the building. Okay, in the ancient building, they build outside wall, and you inside you have your house, residence, and your office, your temple for the ancestral worship. That's a common situation, and I think in the countryside, in Taiwan or traditional in China still have this kind of, they have a wall outside, and then your residence inside, and then you have the place to worship, and you work. If you are government officer, you also have an office there. So Zigong's answer is, yeah, I'm good, right? The house is beautiful, you can see it. But Confucius is, they have the higher wall. It's not that easy to see. You have to go through the gate. He's not like me. You can just look through. Okay. You have to go inside the gate. So I want to give you a picture here. I just find it because that's come with the word, the so-called 万仞宫墙, 万仞, 10,000 yard wall. Okay. You can see I took this picture. I think it's a few months ago when I visit Taiwan. That's in the Taipei City Confucius Temple. All Confucius temple, all built with very high wall outside. You can see this guy walking. You cannot peek through, right? Okay, so that's based on this comment. Okay, they always write 万仞宫墙. That means 10,000 yards palace wall. Okay, so the wall must be high, so you cannot see. If you want to see how beautiful inside, you have to go through the gate. Okay, I think that's come from this chapter. Yeah, Amount, please.
That is a great example of a picture being worth 1,000 words. I'm very glad you snapped that. I need to make sure I get it uploaded into the anthology.
It's in the text. It's in the text. I just
the metaphor is exquisite. The rhetorical wit is impressive because, again, back to that battle of etiquette. Here he's being complimented by his superior at the expense of putting down his master. And he is torn between loyalties, and he's found this avenue to both affirm his master and gently remonstrate with him about his teacher, his true master. and Mark driving, Mark S, had asked something about the explicit or implicit message of how should a student treat a teacher. Here you see it in spades. You respect your teacher more than your employer, more than your parents, but you also know how to gently and very gently correct those who are in greater position than you, who are your superiors. Perhaps not the master, because Confucius was almost above their levels of being able to correct him. Though we do see it just a couple of times with whimsy things like, let's build a boat and sail away from here. Okay, no, we'd get tired. Those tactful ways of sort of leading your superior to the conclusion themselves. And I like the fact that the metaphor has become the literal concrete walls of now Confucian temples, making a metaphor into a reified thing. I really do appreciate that.
Thank you, Amam. Kwang, please.
It is interesting here that Zhang, who was the disciple from merchant background with down-to-earth common sense, gave to Confucius the same praise than Yan Hui, who was the embodiment of the impoverished gentry guy, who was a little bit clumsy and impractical, to be frank, but who was praised by Confucius as the perfect embodiment of perfect virtue because he could be happy in poverty and with almost nothing to enjoy with on the material dimension. And I would say that it's quite interesting because, after all, Confucianism is the cement uniting the Chinese people throughout 25th century. And we have here a disciple who was at first a merchant, united with another disciple who was an impractical member of the gentry, Yan Hui. I stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Kwang. Other comment, questions about this one? Okay, so we can continue on Zhigong's defense, right? Remember at the beginning, people ask what's the teachers, your teacher's teacher. Right now, people said you are better than your teacher. Okay, right now the next one, I believe Kwang will read is about another guy, Sun Su, right? After I think that's a continue from this one. He starts to criticize, okay, Confucius. Let's see how Zhigong respond. Kwang, please.
19.24, translation by Robert Eno. Shu Sun Wu Shu disparaged Zhongni. Zhigong said, there is no point in it. Zhongni cannot be disparaged. The worthiness of others is like a hill. One may climb to the top. Zhongni was the sun and moon. There is no way to climb to them. Even if people wish to cut themselves off from them, what harm does this do? What harm does this do to the sun and moon? At most, it simply shows they have no sense of scale.
Thank you, Kwang. Let's do. Oh, just 1 minute.
Feels like Zhigong's employment gets more perilous with each chapter.
Okay, Amam, please.
Okay. Book 19, chapter 24. Shu San Wu Shu disparaged Zhang Ni, Confucius. Zhang said, it doesn't work. Zhang Ni, Confucius, cannot be disparaged. Other worthy men are like hills. They can be stepped over. Zhang Ni is like the sun or the moon. It's in no way could he be stepped over. Despite a person's wanting to be cut off from them, what harm do they do the sun or the moon? It only shows they don't know their own capabilities.
Thank you, Mom. So here you can see Zhongni, Zhigong start to refer his teacher as Zhongni. Okay, just continuous. So that's the another thing to notice. Okay, but Zhigong still his use metaphor. Okay, so he compare not previous one. Zhigong said Zhongni, the Confucius, the wall is much higher. That's why you don't see the beauty of the building. But right now, people, Sun Wu Su continue to criticize Confucius. And then he said, oh, Confucius, just like sun and moon, is no use to criticize. If you criticize him, just show how short, okay, the shortage, okay, you have. So I think that's his metaphor. It's also display, show how Zhigong use his language skill. Okay, Ama, please.
Yeah, like I said, it sounds like things are getting tenser because he's tried a gentle correction, and Shusan Wushu isn't letting up on talking smack about his master, but his adoption of Zhongni, the familial name or familiar name for Confucius, is a tactical choice on Sogong's part, because if he refers to him at this point as my master or my teacher or anything else, he puts him elevated once again and conflicts with what he has just been told from his employer, basically. And so what he is doing is he's adopting a little bit of what Shusan Wushu has done to ingratiate himself and make what he has to say more palatable. And he still isn't telling him he's out and out wrong. He just says, and I add the because it's not in there, but my God, if I could actually be a fly on the wall of this actual conversation, he took a beat before launching into this metaphor because he had to be shown to seriously consider what Shusan Wu Shu had said. And so that it doesn't work is much more gentle than shut your damn mouth. You don't know what you're saying. I'm impressed by it. I'm really impressed by sort of the gentle way he tries to remain connected to somebody with whom he's having what you could say is a fundamental disagreement. And so there is a lesson of ren and loyalty in this that is both to the interlocutor and to the master himself. So once again, hats off to Zhigong. There's a reason this guy got a job.
Thank you, Mom. Kwang, please.
Yes, I want to stress that Zhigong was a very distinguished diplomat at the time. At the conference of 482 BCE, called the Conference of Huangjue, he managed to convince the king of Wu, Fu Chai, not to attack Lu. Okay, and the king of Fu Chai of Wu was a major sovereign at the time. So just to give you an example, that Zhigong was, let's say, somebody at the time. And I would say that the other thing I want to mention, that there are many aristocrats at the time who were a little bit upstaged by Confucius. They were a little bit annoyed that the little member of the small gentry was giving them lessons of morality. So uh, it is not a surprise that they attack Confucius. I stop here.
Yeah, thank you, Kwang. I think that's interesting. That explain many things, right? So if you can take it's difficult, and you should know. We should know the situation get worse after this during this time after the death of Confucius, because the ancient tradition, ritual, the social structure start to change, and then a lot of people really annoyed by this. And then that's why you can see how Zigong, has been challenged, right? First talk, oh, actually you are better than your teacher. Secondly, people start to criticize his teacher. And then right now we are going to see the last one on the book 19. Okay, Chen Ziqin. I think Ziqin also Confucius. Is that right? Ziqin also Confucius' disciple. Okay. Am I right, Kwang? He also Confucius, but
Um,
it could be different one, right? It's not the
yeah,
Chen. Okay. Yeah, it's a different one. It's not the Confucius disciple. That's another, probably the same name. Okay. Because some place talk about this one is Confucius disciple, but I don't think that he's a Confucius disciple. That's another challenge. Say, Zigong, you are too respectful to Confucius. Okay. And I will see how Zigong put the final words about Confucius. And that's also important. Okay.
yeah.
Kwang.
Yes, first, you're right that to make a distinction that there are probably two Chongzi Qin, one who is a minor disciple of Confucius, and the other one, which is this one, which appear here, was probably an aristocrat of Lu. Okay,
Yeah.
that being said, 19.25 by Professor Robert Eno, Cheng Ziqin said to Zigong, "You are a reverend man. How could Zhongli be worthier than you?" Zigong said, Junzi may be known as wise by a single phrase he utters, and by a single phrase he may be known as unwise. One cannot but be careful of what one says. The master cannot be matched, just as there are no steps one can climb to reach the sky. Had the master been entrusted with management of a state or a family domain, it would have been like the saying, he set them up and they stood, he guided them and they walked, he comforted them and they came, he moved them and they were in harmony. In life, he was celebrated. In death, he was mourned. How can he be matched?
Okay, thank you, Kwang. Okay, so Amang, please. You are muted, Amang.
Sorry. One more time. Book 19, chapter 25. Chen Ziqin said to Zigong, "You're too respectful to Confucius. How can Zhong Ni be worthier than you?" Zigong said, "A Junzi can show that he knows in one comment, or show that he doesn't know in one comment. He has to be cautious about what he says. That teacher cannot be matched, is like the sky cannot be reached by ascending stairs. Teachers' achievements to the state and to families could be like the saying, he sets up, thus people stand. He guides, thus people act. He appeases, thus people come. He activates, thus people become harmonized. In life, he was mourned. In death, or in life, he was honored. In death, he was mourned. How can he be matched?
Thank you, Amang. So that's another way to praise his teacher. And he's talking about Confucius has a high wall, very high, so you cannot see it. Then talking about Confucius like a sun and the moon. Okay, if you criticize, try to damage sun and moon, just show how short you are. Right now, you're talking about just like heaven, like the sky so high, you cannot use staircase to reach. Okay, then Confucius is so powerful. Okay, I want to read is he set up those people stand. He guides those people act. He appease those people come. He activate those people become harmonized. Okay, so that's the way he talk. And how can he be matched? It's unmatchable. So that's the way talk about this. One small thing here is talking about 道之施行. This one is the same 道, but I believe here doesn't mean 道 when we translate as 道. It means 道 guiding. Okay, so it's not used as a word as 道, even not lowercase 道. That means 道 guiding, like your tour guide. Okay, so I think that's one thing. Finally, I want to praise Zhang's language skill. And all this chapter, when I myself read it, he is promote, elevate Confucius in certain level, okay? And in the way, keep the distance from Confucius and still keep Zhang himself status in the government, okay? So in this way, I see Zhang is very smart and is very practical. And that's why he can be so successful in making money and also in politics. So great guy, let's put it this way. Okay, that's what I learned from this last few chapters. Thank you, everyone. And Amang, please, yeah.
I'll say my 2 cents, and then I've got a 2-year-old who is pounding at my door.
Your door is so
Grandson.
high, she cannot see you.
Hey, grandson demands. No, the door is closed. I digress. I think this is Sikong at his wit's end. That's why we give him the final say in this chapter, and he's saying it to Chen Zichen, who this person also refers to Confucius as Zhang Ni. But here, in reproving him, he insists on talking about that teacher cannot be matched, teacher's achievements. In other words, this guy's a master, and in one word, you demonstrate either your wisdom or lack thereof. He doesn't say that directly to him as an accusation, but he does say a junsa can show that he knows in one comment or show that he doesn't know in one comment. That is a cutting sort of slight in this etiquette game, because then this figure that he's talking to is left with 2 choices: either to point out that, to elevate the argument, or admit he himself is not a junsa, and therefore he doesn't know what he means by he knows or doesn't know in one comment. Either way, this is a death threat in high etiquette terms, while wearing a very buttoned up jacket, sipping tea and smiling. And it's interesting to me that Zigong still has the wherewithal in this extremely disapproving manner to still treat this person who he's interacting with Ren, with consideration of him and an opportunity for him to just walk back what he said or just don't carry it any further and things could be just fine. Really is quite the bit of political savvy, rhetorical genius, and probably exactly what the master wanted his students to go be as junses. Thoughtful, considerate, morally elevated, cognizant of their decision making, and working always towards harmony for everyone in their circle. Thank you all. I will see you next week when we wrap up with chapter 20. Mark, unless you had a comment directly for me, I've got a 2-year-old who's really taken precedent here.
It's just on the language of your translation. It seemed ungrammatical at one small point, so I just wanted to note that.
Let me look at. Okay. Okay, so go ahead.
In the sentence, that teacher cannot be matched, is like that the sky cannot be reached by ascending by stairs. I think you have to take out is like that and just write that teacher cannot be matched, just as sky cannot be.
Okay, hold on.
Or
That
or
teacher,
just drop the, does it work to just drop the is? Because that teacher cannot be matched. No, that doesn't work.
No,
okay. So that teacher cannot be matched.
just as.
So all of this,
Okay, go ahead.
just as the teacher cannot be matched, just as the sky cannot be. Actually, yes, that is grammatically better. Oops. Except I'm spelling wrong.
Yeah, just you. Yeah,
There
great.
we go.
Thank you.
There we go.
You cannot spell just. Okay, so
That's what happens when two people are trying to correct at the same time. The teacher cannot be matched, just as the sky cannot be reached by ascending stick. That does read better. I absolutely agree. Thank you. Mamanzo, I will see you all next week.
So Mark, we have your answer. Then we hear Kwang. Kwang, please.
I will be very brief. I just want to say that it's absolutely normal that Zikong has the last word of chapter 19 because he was the living embodiment of the integration of the lower trigram and the upper trigram. That's all.
Thank you, Kwang. Okay, so, I think we finished the book 19, and really thank you everyone. That's a great job. And then join us next week. That's the last chance. Well, we should say last chance. Okay, to discuss Analects, and it's a long journey. We start from 2022. Okay. Up to where he's the one, and like we go through every single word. Okay. And then I'm not sure how many people do that in today. Okay. At least we achieved it. I think that's a really great job. And then and everyone, most of you, during here for a long time. Okay, so come back next week, and the next week book 20, and only have the 3 chapters. A little bit long on each one, but not that long. I'm very sure we will finish probably in 1 hour. So yeah, thank you, and see you next week.